Do you think Mark was the first to hear the whispers in room 307? Do you think he was the first to see his reflection living its own life? No, he wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. Before Mark, there was a man named Daniel. He was 27. He was an artist. Not the kind who paints on commission and sells in galleries. He was the kind who paints because he can't breathe otherwise, because the world inside his head was brighter than the world outside. He came to this city because he wanted silence, a place where he could work, where no one would disturb him. He found an ad in an old local newspaper, a small square block on the last page. Room for rent, suitable for creative people. Quiet house, low price. Daniel called the number, and on the other end, a calm, slightly raspy voice answered. Mrs. Harrison. 3rd floor, room 307. Move in tomorrow. He moved in the next morning. A sunny, clear, almost transparent morning. He remembers opening the heavy oak door and seeing the room for the first time. High ceiling, echoing every sound. Floral wallpaper faded to a pale yellow. A large window overlooking an old garden. And the mirror, huge, full length, in a heavy wooden frame. It stood directly across from the bed, and in it like a lake. The whole room was reflected, and himself. Daniel walked up to it, looked at his reflection, smiled. His reflection smiled back. A moment later, as a reflection should. Everything was normal. Everything was right. Then, but something was wrong. He couldn't tell what. Something was wrong. He stared into the mirror at his reflection and couldn't understand what troubled him. His reflection stared back, as it should, but there was something in that look. Foreign. Or maybe. He imagined it. He didn't sleep until morning. He sat in the chair, wrapped in a blanket, and drew. Drew the room, the bed, the window, the wardrobe, the mirror. And then, when dawn broke, he noticed a detail that didn't exist in reality. In his drawing, in the mirror, there was a door that didn't exist in the room. He stared at the drawing and couldn't remember when he had drawn it. He definitely hadn't drawn the door, but it was there, in black pencil, clear, insistent, as if someone had guided his hand. On the second night, Daniel decided not to sleep. He poured himself strong tea, sat in the chair, took his notebook, and waited. Waited for the whisper. It came exactly at 2:47. The same words, the same voice, but now it sounded different, louder, closer, as if the speaker was not by his ear, but inside his skull. You draw what you see, the voice asked. Daniel didn't answer. He watched the mirror. His reflection was standing by the bed, but Daniel was sitting in a chair. That was impossible. He slowly rose and walked closer. The reflection didn't copy his movement. It stayed in place, and it was looking at him, looking as if it had been waiting for him to come closer. And then it smiled, slowly, as if unsure whether it was allowed, and said,
I used to draw too, and I was alive.
Daniel recoiled. His heart skipped a beat. He wanted to scream, but his voice stopped in his throat. He stepped back toward the door, fumbled for the handle, pulled, locked. The handle wouldn't move. It was cold, icy, as if the metal had frozen. Open it! He screamed. No one answered. Only the reflection in the mirror shook its head and said,
It won't open, Daniel. It never opens after midnight. It's always been that way. It always will be.
Daniel pressed his back against the door. Sweat ran down his face. He stared at his reflection, but no longer knew which one of them was real. He slowly slid down to the floor, wrapped his arms around his knees, and sat there until morning. In the mirror, no one. Empty. Only himself, sitting by the door. The next morning, he went downstairs to Mrs. Harrison. She was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, as if she had been waiting for him. The house smelled of dried herbs and old wood. She raised her head and looked at him. Her gaze was heavy, knowing. You looked into the mirror at night, didn't you? Daniel nodded. I didn't want anyone to rent that room again, but the house must live. People must come and go. Sometimes they leave. Sometimes they stay. Who was in my room? Who spoke to me from the mirror? Mrs. Harrison was silent. Long. I don't know his name, but he was an artist, like you. He rented this room 12 years ago. He said the mirror inspired him. He painted strange pictures. In every one there was a mirror, and in every mirror someone else stood. And then he stopped leaving the room. 3 days later, I opened the door. He was gone. Only his things. And the mirror. The glass was warm, as if someone had just been standing behind it. She fell silent. Daniel looked at her without blinking. He felt cold spreading inside him. I have to leave, he said. She looked at him with a long, steady gaze and said, You can try, but the door will only open when the mirror no longer remembers you, and it remembers everyone who has ever looked into it. It never forgets. Daniel stood up and walked to the stairs. She called after him at the door. Lock the wardrobe at night, Daniel, and never open it if you hear knocking. Understood? Never. He nodded, though he didn't understand why. That night, he locked his room door, slid the bolt, and sat in the chair with his phone in his hand. He wanted to call the police, but the screen showed no signal. He tried to open the window to call for help. The window wouldn't budge, as if sealed from the inside. Then he took his notebook, sat against the wall facing the door, and waited. He decided he wouldn't look into the mirror. He wouldn't blink. He wouldn't sleep. But he was tired. So tired that after an hour, he dozed off. He doesn't know how long passed. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. He woke to a sound. Soft, rhythmic, knocking. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. As if someone was knocking their knuckles against the wood from inside the wardrobe. Daniel slowly turned his head. The wardrobe stood in the corner. Dark, massive, with carved doors. It was closed. Daniel had closed it himself before going to sleep. But from inside, the knocking came. Someone was knocking from there. Daniel didn't go to the wardrobe. He stood up, stepped back against the wall, pressed his back to the wallpaper. The knocking came again. 3 knocks. Louder. More insistent. As if whoever was inside knew Daniel was awake. Are you asleep? Came a voice from the wardrobe. The voice was his own. His voice. But it didn't sound the way Daniel usually spoke. It was softer, deeper, as if the speaker were underwater. Are you asleep, Daniel? The voice repeated. Daniel understood everything. He understood that room 307 was not just a room. It was a trap. A door between worlds. The mirror was a portal. The wardrobe was an exit, but the exit led inside. He understood that Mrs. Harrison knew everything, but she couldn't stop him. No one could. He knew he had to leave something behind, something that would warn the next one. He turned to the wall of the wardrobe, pulled a pocket knife from his pocket, and scratched into the wood. Don't look into the mirror. Don't open the wardrobe. And never blink. He wanted to write more, but the double from the chair walked over to him. Close. So close that Daniel felt cold radiating from it. That's enough, Daniel. You've done enough. Now go and close the door behind you. Daniel stepped back, stepped into the room with reversed clocks and mirrored books. He looked at his reflection in the window, but in the window, it wasn't him. It was Mark, a young man with a suitcase climbing the stairs. In a few years, Mark would move into this room. He would look into the mirror. He would hear voices. He would open the wardrobe. Daniel wanted to scream at him. Don't come in. Don't look. Run. But his voice wouldn't obey. He was inside. And Mark was outside. And no force could cross that boundary. The wardrobe door closed behind him, softly, almost gently, as if someone had shut it from the outside. Daniel stayed inside. He lives in the wardrobe. He sees everyone who comes. He hears their footsteps. He hears their whispers. He hears them open the wardrobe and step inside. And every time, he tries to stop them. Every time, he scratches the wall, leaving warnings. But they don't see. They don't know. They look into the mirror, they open the wardrobe, and they become the next ones. He can't leave, but he can warn. If you ever find yourself in room 307, don't look into the mirror, and don't open the wardrobe, or you'll become the next previous tenant. And if you've already looked, don't blink, because when you blink, they switch places. And you'll stay inside, and they'll come out, and they'll wait for the next one.